Welcome back to HR Coffee Time, the podcast to help you have a successful and fulfilling HR or people career without working yourself into the ground. If we haven't met before, hello, I'm Faye Wallace, a career and executive coach who specialises in supporting HR and people professionals through my one-to-one coaching services and also my Inspiring HR Leadership Development Programme. If you're watching this on YouTube, because the podcast became available for the very first time on YouTube with the last episode, so this is the second ever video episode, you'll see that Bernie is behind me, my little dog. He didn't want to miss out on the action, so you can give Bernie a little wave. I'm sure that he would love it. But coming back to the point of the show today, we are going to be meeting a fantastic Chief People Officer called John Scrooby, because a little while ago I decided that I'd really like to create a series of HR Coffee Time that was specifically dedicated to helping demystify the Chief People Officer role. I just met so many HR professionals who were unclear on what the role really entailed, so even if they would be perfect for it, it felt a bit daunting. So they wouldn't put themselves forward for the role, or if they were in the role and they hadn't seen anyone else do that particular position, they maybe hadn't had that role exist in their organisation before, they could have a bit of a wobble confidence-wise. So I let all the HR Coffee Time listeners know that this was going to be a new series and asked if any of you knew some great Chief People Officers who might be happy to join me on the show. One of the people who replied was Christina Kalman, and this is the email that she sent me. She said that she wanted to recommend John because he has created a really unique modern flavour of people operations, always pushing business outcomes, yet with a deep care for humans as well as innovation. He also leverages his former career in IT, which gives a unique twist. I've never worked anywhere that the people team is so embedded, trusted, and impactful. I mean, how amazing is that? I don't know if you can have much more of a glowing recommendation. As soon as I got that email, I was really excited about the opportunity of meeting John, and he didn't disappoint. He was absolutely fantastic. I really hope that you're going to enjoy learning from him as much as I did. To tell you a little bit more about him, he has held the Chief People Officer position for 3 years, having worked in HR for 10 years, all at the same company, which is called Masabi and is a tech company. Before that, he actually had an IT career. So again, he's a really interesting person to talk to because of the fact he had quite a big career change, really. There are so many things, though, that stood out to me when I met him. He's so values-driven, he's so caring, and I'm incredibly grateful that he was very honest and transparent and open about what it really is like to be a Chief People Officer and what the challenges are. So I won't keep you in suspense anymore. I'm going to move us along now to the main part of the interview where you get to hear from him himself. John, welcome to the show. It's fantastic to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're so welcome. I know that not just me, but everyone listening is so grateful that you agreed to do this. And we all can't wait to hear your answers to the 9 questions that I'm going to be asking you.
Well, I hope my rather boring experience is exciting for others. So let's see.
I am sure it's not boring at all. And let's go ahead and find out. I'll dive straight in and ask you the very first question, which is, how did you get your first CPO role?
I wish I had a better story for you, but the truth is that I think I got really lucky. Right? The short version is that my boss made me do it. The longer version is that I got really lucky, and I think I didn't start my career in HR. I started my career in technology. And I ended up, after 15 years of being in technology and running tech teams, I ended up at a tech business with a CEO and a boss who saw something in me that perhaps I didn't even see. And I was about 6 months into my role, and he suggested to me that he was looking for someone to really focus in on the people and the culture of the business. At the time, we were turning over about 40% of the business every year, right? It was a really tough place to be. And these were problems that the CEO was trying to solve. And I was, I guess, well placed because I'm a pretty opinionated person. I have opinions. I'm not shy to share those opinions. And I was doing that around the executive table, and I was sort of talking about culture within my own team and how I expected things to be and what I wanted to change. I was being very vocal about those things and offering solutions as well and trying to get people on board. And I guess presenting myself in that way allowed Brian, our CEO, to sort of see an opportunity that I didn't. And he asked me to do the role, and he just said that he'd been sort of trying to solve a lot of people and culture problems, and we needed to solve turnover and turn the business into a place that people actually wanted to work, because he genuinely felt that was the way that we could increase profits and increase markets, and with what's good for the people in the business is going to be good for the business itself. And I sort of looked at him and said, Brian, I think you're talking about HR. And he said, yeah. And I said, no, like there's no way that I'm doing the HR job. That's not for me. And then over the course of about 3 months, he slowly wore me down. He introduced me to somebody that he had worked with in the past, an executive coach who was very, very active in the HR world, who kind of spoke to me about the evolution that HR was going through at the time, and what his vision for HR was, and what the industry's vision for HR is. And I took that on, and there was a great article that I remember reading from the Harvard Business Review that spoke about the sort of 3 most important roles in the business: the CEO, the CFO, and the chief people officer, with the chief people officer being the sort of new emerging function that was different to what it had been in the past. And along with those sort of avenues of advice, and I also read a book, Laszlo Bock's book, Work Rules, from Google. I think every HR person has read that book at some point. But again, that just sort of filled me with an excitement for, it made me realize that what I thought HR was not what it is. But there was a lot of opportunity there. So yeah, I eventually agreed to take the role as a bit of a test. And I think here, sort of 10 years later, I'm still testing it, but I'm still in the same jobs, same company, same boss. So yeah, loving it at the moment.
How fantastic. So it sounds like the role found you, and you actually needed quite a lot of talking into it.
Yeah, I think part of my personality is that I'm a bit of a rule breaker, right? Like I typically don't like the status quo. That's why I think I did quite well, or as well as I did in engineering, because you get to change and break things all the time, right? And you don't have to stick to anybody else's rules. It's really accepted that you can go and experiment and mess things up, and like that's part of the role. And I think that was the challenge that I saw in HR when I was sort of on the outside looking in. I saw an industry or a role where I just couldn't be that person. And I think working with Brian and the executive team at the time and now, they kind of really let me explore those elements of my personality in my role, right? And really bringing that sort of fearless experimentation to the role, which I'm really grateful for. And it's the sort of thing that keeps me excited every day.
Well, it's wonderful to hear that it's keeping you excited. And what else was wonderful was the brilliant resources that you mentioned. So for everyone listening, I'll make sure that I put links to the Harvard Business Review article in the show notes, and I'll also put a link to the book that you recommended. And I know you said every HR person will have read that book. I actually haven't. So
it's a really interesting book.
That'll be moving to the very top of my reading pile. But
Cool.
There are so many questions I could ask you now, but I'm really conscious that I've got these set 9 that I've set myself this challenge of getting
you take
through.
Take this anywhere you want to go. I'm very happy to go anywhere.
Oh, thanks. Well, I'll move us along to the next question, but I know so many people will be saying, no, Faye, ask him, what did he think HR was? So, okay, maybe I won't move to the next question. Instead, can I ask you, you didn't want to take the role because you thought, no, it's not for me. What was it that you thought HR was?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, right? And I think the first part of that answer is that I'm almost certain that I had it wrong, right? I was always an outsider looking in, and I couldn't claim today to fully understand what the HR teams that I used to work with in my past roles, what they were actually doing under the hood, right? I think that was on me. Like as a manager, I don't think I involved them enough, and I wish I had involved them more. Just now that I realized the enormous value. But as an outsider looking in, I saw HR as a compliance function almost, right? A function that protected the business from, and by the business, I mean protected the leadership team from making legal mistakes for the most part, and then picked up like little bits and pieces like training and things like that. But I guess as a manager in engineering functions or in engineering teams, I felt a really big personal responsibility that I was the person building the team and building the culture within that team. I know now that I could have got an enormous amount of value by inviting our HR business partners in, and I wish I had done that more. But that's how I viewed HR. I think a lot of people perhaps still view it like that, depending on your industry, right? If you're in the tech sector, things might feel a little bit different. But I think if you're in other sectors, HR might still be seen by people both outside and in as a compliance operational thing, certainly not a strategic partner. And that's really what I didn't want to do. And to be fair, I don't think I ever really did that. I've spent such a small amount of my time doing that. So yeah, really, really, really happy that HR as an industry has moved on. But I think the expectations of HR moved on. And I think having a CEO that really values the function as a strategic partner is the first big step in that.
Yes, it's great to hear that you clearly have such a supportive CEO who really does see the benefit in having a brilliant people function and a brilliant chief people officer. So the second question is for you, what has been the biggest difference between being a head of or HR director and being a CPO? And that actually makes me think, did you go straight into being a chief people officer or did you hold one of those positions first?
Yeah, so I held the other positions first. I went straight into being the sort of number one person in HR, but sort of number one in a function of one, which was tough, right? And then I slowly sort of scaled the business, scaled the department as we scaled the business and kind of feeling my way through and learning as I went. But in truth, with a lot of really great support around me. So over the last sort of 10 years, I've moved from being, well, first of all, the head of the IT operations department. And then my first role in HR was head of people operations. But like I said, I was head of myself. And then I've grown the team to a team of 9 now, supporting almost 300 people in 20 countries. So I've gone from head of people operations to chief people officer. And if I'm to think of what changed for me in that process, there's a lot, right? There's a lot of things that I think changed. But if I'm to focus it on one really big thing, I think it's true for all leadership roles, it's the difference between being at that senior director, VP level versus executive is almost certainly the idea of ownership and accountability, right? If you're in a position where you can take any problem and any challenge and look at that problem or challenge and say, all right, this is for someone else, and I'm really glad I don't have to deal with that, and then go give it to them and give them that issue to go and solve and sort of step back going, wow, let me go and pick up my list of things that I have to do. If you're doing that, you're working at director level, right? If you have to take that problem and say, this is my problem, no matter whose remit it's in, this is as much my problem as it is the CTOs or the CPOs or the CROs or the CEOs, let's go and sort of work with those people, my peers, to figure out what the answer to this issue is. And if you never, ever let go of responsibility for sorting out that issue, then you're working at executive level. And I think that's the difference when you step into that chief people officer role. Nothing becomes somebody else's problem. Like every single thing that happens in the business is in some way your problem, your accountability that you have no escape from. And you really have to bring to bear all of your skills to try to work through those challenges, even though they sit somewhere else in the business. And yeah, does that make sense?
It makes total sense. To help bring it to life even more, would you be able to share an example with us of where this has happened?
Say, for example, you've got an executive who has a leadership team below them that needs work, right? That is your challenge to go and solve. Like it's certainly the other executives' challenge to hire the right people and train them and make sure they are being empowered in the way that we need to empower all of our leaders. But where you see that challenge for other executives, it's my role to go and sort of identify it and work with those people until that problem is solved, right? Finance issues, like where are we going to get the next sort of 10 million pound in growth? I can't just sit back and say, all right, that's a sales issue. The sales guys have got to go out and sell that, right? I've got to go and sit with the CRO and say, all right, what are we doing? How are we going to get that growth? What are the people problems, or what are all the problems that exist that stand between us getting from where we are today to where we need to be? And how can I solve some of those problems, right? As many of those problems for you as I can. And for the ones that I'm not solving, who's solving them? And how can I support them to solve it? Do they have the right organization to solve those problems? So yeah, the challenges that I'm working with daily span from ER cases that are sort of directly in the remit of an HR team to literally how are we going to grow the business? What geographies are we going to move into in terms of our go-to-market strategy? It's really, really diverse, and you just really have to take hold of those and own them.
I know that's something some people can feel really nervous of if they've had a pure HR background and thinking, well, I don't really know or understand a lot of the different business challenges that there are or a lot of the different business functions. And so that makes them quite nervous of stepping up into the role because they think, well, if I'm asked to contribute to the overall strategy, or yes, how are we going to generate more revenue, or whatever the big business challenge might be, they'll think, well, I don't know what to answer.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for someone who's feeling like that?
It's so easy, right? It's so easy. And as an HR person, you are so well prepared for this, because I can guarantee you have been doing this since the first day of your first job, right? And the problems that you've been facing have been much bigger than how do I go and find 10 million pounds somewhere else? Because the problems you've been facing have been like really complex people problems. And those are super difficult to deal with, right? And I think HR people have, our job is hard, right? Like, wow, is our job tough? HR people have you don't have a choice when you're not sitting in front of a spreadsheet that's giving you news, right? You're sitting in front of a human being who's typically telling you things, and you're having to react to those things. You're telling people about roles that don't exist anymore. You're doing a really, really hard job that there is no playbook for, right? Nobody teaches you how to have a conversation to let someone go, to make someone redundant. You can follow the rules and you can follow the legal terms, but nobody teaches you what to say when somebody starts crying in the room. Right? Nobody teaches you what to say when they start talking about their kids. And so we have really, really tough jobs. And for the most part, we are flying by sort of the seat of our trousers all the time, right? There's no playbook for what we do. So that step up into the CPO role, it's just a continuation of the great work that you've been doing up until now. You're just looking at different things. And yeah, I won't say that I would have been able to do it without fantastic support, right? I've had incredible support from my peers and from my boss. I'm not sure, I'm really happy that I made this step in my current business. I think it made it as easy as it possibly would be. But yeah, like the advice, just believe in yourself. You've been doing this already. It's just an evolution.
Well, it's lovely to hear such an inspiring, positive message. Hopefully that's giving some people comfort and reassurance if they've been worrying about it. But also interesting to hear what you said about having great peer support. Mm-hmm. And I know that you've developed within the organisation that you're still in now, but I'm sure there must have been some ways that you reached out to your peers for support, or is it that they all just automatically started helping you?
I'm always reaching out for support, right? Whether it's to my peers or to someone else. I wouldn't want to have done my job without my coach, for example, right? So if I'm giving advice to someone, what do you need to do a great job as a CPO? You need first a safe space to vent, right? Ideally with somebody who can relate to what you're going through. To me, that's been my coach, John Waltman. He's just fantastic. I wouldn't be here if I didn't have that opportunity to bounce things off of him and literally be in tears at once, trying to figure out why did I take this role? Why did I put myself in the situation? And he's just great at reframing, right? So I think first of all, you need a safe space to help people reframe your current situation, because you can get into some very tough situations as a CPO. So in that sense, you're reaching out, right? But certainly with my peers, I think that's got a lot to do with your leadership style. And I think my leadership style is one of very open, maybe perhaps sometimes too open, honest vulnerability. And I think as I showed this very vulnerable part of myself, so for example, I speak about my mental health very, very openly. That was kind of one of the reasons I took this role, is because I felt that I could make an impact on the world by changing workplaces, in the sense that I would create a space where people at work could talk about their mental health and not experience the same kind of issues that I had when I was much younger, experiencing mental ill health in a workplace that wasn't prepared for that. So I'm very open and I lead with vulnerability. And I think that helps others. It makes it easier to get support from others, makes it easier for them to offer.
There can be a real worry about being vulnerable. So it's wonderful to hear how empowering it can be, and actually how helpful it can be for everyone around you as well.
God, it's so easy, right? Like, so I think one of the things that make me pull my hair out, I think maybe it stems from television, right? I think there are no really good role models, or very few very good role models of successful business people on television, right? All these successful business people are portrayed as in some way hard and unforgiving and like careless, right? Inhuman almost, particularly for women, right? Like successful women on television are almost always portrayed as the opposite of what people think women should be, nurturing and caring and all these things. It's always a very hard persona. So I think that's the role model that people are seeing. And I think that in these environments, that's how they have to act in order to be successful. But I'm very grateful to be able to say that that's not been my experience, right? As I've sort of taken on executive leadership and been very fortunate to work with a lot of great people, even at board level, right? These people are just amazing human beings, right? That really genuinely care for others and really are okay to be vulnerable about their lives. Now, some more than others, but at their core, they're all like really great people. So I kind of pull my hair out when I see people trying to put on that hard persona, that hard success driven persona. I'm like, man, you're missing such an easy leadership activity. If you just be a little bit more vulnerable, show a little bit more of your human side, you can bring people with you so much easier. It makes your life so easy. I'm like, why do you make your life hard for yourself by being closed and difficult to sort of get to? So yeah, I don't know if there's advice in there, but yeah.
No, it's absolutely brilliant to hear. And it makes me think of one of my favorite leadership books, which is Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, where she really champions the power of vulnerability. So that's yet another thing I will put in the show notes for everyone in case anyone wants to check it out. But I better move us along. I feel like I could just chat to you all day, having only asked 2 of the questions of the 9 I've got. So if I move along to question 3, it is, once you'd started your CPO role, your first one, how was it different to what you had expected?
I don't know that I had very many expectations, right? I guess I just jumped into it thinking that I could do it, and then very quickly you realize how wrong you were. But I think the probably the biggest thing that I even today still struggle with as the CPO, I think also for most executive roles, but maybe more so as this chief people officer, living with the outcomes of your own ideology. So I think we all want to, certainly I do, like I want to make an impact at my workplace. I want to feel like I'm doing something right, but I want to do that through the lens of my own personal values, right? And my own personal values have got a lot to do with fairness, mental health, those sorts of things, right? Like people-focused type stuff. So I have this ideology, a strong ideology, and I really want to bring that ideology to bear in my business. And I want to prove that we can be profitable and we can build a business like this. Now, but it's easy to stand on the sidelines and shout about these ideologies, right? You must do the right thing for people and we must talk about mental health, blah, blah, blah. But it's a completely different thing to have to live with the consequences of implementing that ideology. So an example of that will be, we see it all the time, like pay reviews, right? I'll walk into the pay review process and I'll be like, hey, we have to drive an incredibly fair, perfectly fair process. So in that situation, this group of people now need to have some pay rise of some amount. Now, it's easy for me to say that, but that also then means that some other group somewhere don't get to have a pay rise. Right. And now I have to live with it. I need to go and sit and look those people in the eye and tell them why they're getting sort of 0% pay rise. Right. So that I think is something today that I struggle with, this idea of bringing to bear the ideologies, but having to sort of carry the torch beyond that, living with the outcomes. And I think that's where the really interesting work happens. Right. There's this kind of gray area of doing the right thing, but also running a business. And I firmly believe that you can do both. You absolutely can do both. I think there are a lot of examples around the world of successful businesses that do both. But the truth of the matter is that doing the right thing is massively subjective. Right? You're not in this alone. Like I've got sort of 8 other executives, which are 8 other very well-formed, mature, highly intelligent opinions about something. And everybody talks about doing the right thing, and they're all different things. Because we're all coming to the world from a different place. We're all looking at the world and looking at a problem through a different lens, through our own shared experiences, right? And I think that's the difficult bit. We all want to do the right thing, but we have to figure out what that thing is. And typically, it's not going to be all of what you want to deliver, but it's going to be somebody's right thing. And that's the gray area. And I think there's a lot of interesting impact that you can have on the world and in the business when you're working within that grayness and sort of facilitating the compromises that have to happen in order to deliver something of value that everybody feels, where everybody feels like they have been heard, and we're delivering something that fits their value proposition. So and I guess that's why I like the job. It's really not easy to get there, but yeah, it's an interesting part of the role.
As you were talking that through, it really made me think of the emotional impact. And when you were saying you've got to be able to live with that, you've got to be able to look those people in the eye. And it makes me think I should probably skip a few questions. I will move back to the one that I was going to ask you, which is actually question 6, which is how do you maintain your mental well-being in such a demanding role and such a high priority / demanding role? And you've touched on the fact that mental well-being is something that's really important to you anyway. So I feel that it's a question I'd have loved to ask you anyway. I'm going to accelerate asking it by moving it up the list.
Sure, not an easy answer, if I'm honest. So like I said before, I struggled with mental health in my sort of mid-20s, right? I worked probably too hard, put too much of myself into work, and ended up just in a state of high anxiety, which so I had constant panic attacks, which eventually led to depression. It was just very hard for me to deal with. So what I have today, like I got through that eventually, right? I got through that by seeing like 3 or 4 different types of therapists, and eventually found one that worked, and eventually went on to medication, sort of came out the other end sort of fine. But I came out the other end having done 3 years of pretty intense therapy. And that therapy just gave me an enormous tool belt, right? A tool belt of things that range from just mindset to actual physiological tools that I can implement when I can feel things like anxiety coming on. Now, I hope my sort of whole value proposition is that most people don't have to get it doesn't have to get so bad that people have to go through those things to get those tools. Like they don't have to get to the point where they actually need therapy, but I have that, right? So how do I deal with keeping well? I implement those tools that I've already learned. That's why I say it's not a great answer, because I had to go through a lot to get there. So that's the one thing I have, and I'm grateful that I have it. I learned so much about myself through that process, to the point where I can't understand how we don't teach a lot of these things in schools, right? I don't understand how we don't teach cognitive behavioral therapy in school. Just the general skill of being able to be insightful about your own feelings, like to genuinely critically look at your feelings and your own views and your own emotions. Like that skill, it's beyond me how we don't yet teach that stuff in school, but I sort of learned that, probably badly, but I have some of that. The other things that I do, like I said, I've got a great coach. I have an area where I can go and shout and scream, and feel all my feelings and see them come out in a way that they need to come out, which is essentially this volcano of feelings and emotions and things. I can do that. I have a space where I can do that with somebody who knows me, knows the business, and is frankly trained to deal with the sort of rubbish that I spurt. So I'm very grateful for John and that space that I have. And I have a great home life. I have a wife who I involve in my work. I talk to her about how I feel about things, and she is a great partner in life. So she's a great partner to have when I'm not even struggling with things, when I just want to get things off my chest. I tear myself kicking and screaming to gym 2 or 3 times a week, which is tough, but it helps. I like to travel. I like to ski. I have cats. So I do all the things that most people do. But I think the most important thing is that the recognition that you need something, right? If you're going through a tough role, and I think most of the roles that people feel today are incredibly stressful and incredibly difficult. If you're going through that role blind of your own needs, then I think you can end up somewhere that you don't want to be, right? I'm very happy that the modern day workplace has this idea, the concept of wellness, sort of permeating through what we do, right? We're beginning to recognize that this exists. And to me, all that is just it's a request that individuals recognize that there needs to be something more. And something more is going to be different for everybody. But that's going to be your responsibility, right? As the sort of grown up adult, you've got to get out there and figure out, what do you need? Do you need to get on your bicycle and go and figure out, do you need to get in the swimming pool? Do you need to change your job? What is it that you need to do to take care of yourself? And I think, just as long as you're looking for it, you are going to be fine.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing. I think at the beginning you said, it's not a great answer. I totally challenge that. It's a fantastic answer.
Thank you.
Well, I think it helps really show the humanity behind it, because as she was saying earlier, a lot of the role models that we'll see on TV or in the movies, they're just completely unrealistic, or I don't know, a message we can get sometimes when we're little that you've just got to work all the time and that's the most important thing in the world. And yes, of course, we all want to do a great job, but actually you're going to keel over if you haven't got these things in place to help yourself. So thank you for sharing them with us. And actually, it might tie in with my next question, which is, which skills, habits, or practices have most helped you succeed as a CPO? It may not have anything to do with the well-being, but perhaps it does.
I think I think I'll go back to this idea of vulnerable leadership, right? So I think what I do with my team, my peers, like I make sure that they understand the sort of thing that I'm working on personally, like my own personal development. For me, I get emotional and I say things that I don't mean in a tone that I don't mean. Very quickly, though, I can realize that I've done it and I sort of get angry at myself. But if you're vulnerable and honest enough with the people around you on those things that you're trying to work on to make yourself a better executive, a better husband, a better whatever, I think you get forgiveness when you sort of fall off the wagon, right? So I think one of the practices that has helped me most is that, like, just sharing with people the thing that I'm working on and then asking for forgiveness when you fall off the wagon. I think that's the most powerful thing, right? I think it's actually almost advantageous to you and your relationships if everything's just going fine and you never have a discussion that is about something important internally to you or about the way that we operate. I think you're missing a trick, because I kind of have these conversations, hopefully not too often, but relatively often. I'm going to someone and saying, look, I'm really sorry I reacted like that. I did that because of this reason, and this is how I'm going to do better next time. And that opens up such an interesting channel of communication with that person. It shows vulnerability on my part, but it also invites them in, right? It invites them into that part of your life. And it shows them that they can also be human with me. And then I think that helps the conversation and helps move the relationship forward much quicker. And I think I'm certainly, again, super lucky. I can count so many good friends from people that I either currently work with or have worked with. I've got such a great relationship with my team who report into me, as well as my peers and also my boss, right? These are all people who are very genuine friends, dear friends to me. And I think work is a richer place when that's true. Like I can't imagine going to work working with colleagues, right? Like, how boring. Can you imagine? Like, no, I got to work, and yeah, oftentimes it's really hard, but for the most part, I'm at work with mates, and that makes the day go a little bit quicker. It makes some of the difficult work a lot easier. Just makes it enriches life, right? So that's the goal.
There's such a strong theme of vulnerability and connection and people-focused, emotion-focused leadership and behaviors coming through during our talk today. The next question I'd like to ask you, and it may be on a very similar theme or a different one, is what advice you have for anyone listening who would like to be a chief people officer one day?
Short answer: are you sure? Are you really sure? And there's truth in that, right? Like, it is not an easy place to be. And an HR role in general is not an easy place to be. To be in that sort of executive seat in the HR world is tough. For example, I mean, I'm a bit of an extrovert. I'm sort of ENFP, I think, in the Myers-Briggs terminology. I'm yellow on the DISC scale. I'm sort of creative. I'm a creative people person. I want people to like me. I want to be with people. The truth of the matter is, in this role, not everyone is going to like you. It gets even worse than that. Some people are going to really, really strongly dislike you. I think I hate this concept of the business, right? When people talk about the business did this or the business needs that. The truth of the matter is that that's me. When the business needs something, it's me asking. Like and I don't know why I'm asking, or it's one of my peers who are asking. So the business, in my world, the business has a face. It's a real thing. And when people insult the business, they're insulting me. So when people say this business is something, they're telling me that I'm that thing, right? And I take that to heart. But sometimes people use my name. Like we've got an anonymous engagement survey, as I think most companies do nowadays. And man, the stuff that comes out of that sometimes, right? Now, I hope that we're doing a pretty good job of creating a company that is relatively people first, does all the right things. But there are times when you have to do things that people are going to disagree with, right? So for example, COVID hits, our revenues dry up and we need to make some redundancies, right? Of course, people are going to hate that. Or even worse than that, like we hired too many people and we've got to make redundancies. My fault, right? Not an external thing, certainly my fault. Or whatever happens, because we have this deep ownership of every challenge in the business, whatever is happening, no matter where it comes from, that's me. Like, to me, that's made that happen. I've got full responsibility for that. So people, and that comes out when we're talking about these things. So some people don't, they're okay to mention Be My Name and say really nasty things. I'm not going to go through them all, but I've had some really bad labels applied to me that I look at going like, how did you get there? What did I do to get called that label? It's really hard, right? You have to have a very, very thick skin in this role, but at the same time, it's immensely rewarding, right? In my tech career, there was this certainly a feel of a degree of instant gratification when it came to the rewards that you get from work. Something broke, I stepped in, typed a bunch of stuff on my keyboard, and the thing was fixed. Suddenly we were earning revenues again. Suddenly you're getting your emails again. Easy. 1 hour of work and suddenly you're the hero, right? Great. You can see the value that you add. In HR, none of that, right? None of that. All the short things that happen, they are bad things for people. You're either removing people from roles and stuff like that. It's hard. But the good news always takes really long. When you're moving someone from one role into another role, and then eventually they succeed 2 or 3 years later, or you are working with someone who is not enjoying the role that they're doing, and you're giving them advice, and you see them for once in a blue moon, they actually listen to you and take your advice and do something, and years later they are in a different place. So you really have to squint and look really far back to see the value that you bring. It's much more difficult. So I think in this role, if you're going to take this role, you need to accept those things. The rewards are tough to see, but they're there. The impact is high, but you've got to go looking for it. And not everybody's going to like you. You're going to make decisions that are going to, make at least some people really angry, and that's going to be difficult to deal with.
Your advice about being prepared for how tough it's going to be links in really well with my next question, which is, what is the biggest challenge you've experienced as a CPO?
That's easy, right? It's something that I've sort of preached to my team all the time. The only time that you can do the work that you need to do, realistically, is when your client groups, your peers, the people you're working for, when they invite you in. Right? You cannot do your work unless you're being invited in. And that's a really important, and I think it's one of the most difficult things one of the things that HR leaders get wrong. Right? I was at a course recently, a couple of years ago now at this point, and there was a whole module on getting buy-in from the CEO and from the board to be able to deliver people programs of high impact. Right? And people were talking in that session about how difficult it is for them to engage with their client groups, or to have their client groups sort of take on what the advice that they're trying to give. I was looking at this going, man, wow, like there's just no success. There's no way that you can be successful as an HR leader unless people are asking you to come in and asking you for your help. And I think there's a few ways that you get there. Right? Number one, the most important thing, the thing that I have that I'm so grateful for, is a CEO who's telling everybody else to ask. So I think that's where it starts. Like at leadership level, the CEO is saying, hey, Mr. CTO, Mr. Chief Product Officer, go and ask for this help from the HR people. They're going to give you this advice. I want you to have it, right? It starts there. And if you don't have the CEO doing that, I think it's going to make your role 10 times more difficult. And I think the other thing that you have to do is you've got to get the basics right. Speaking about, when we started the conversation, we were speaking about HR being sort of an operational thing, and that we want to avoid that. Now, as much as we want to avoid a bunch of that stuff, as much as we want to be the sort of strategic partner at the table, there is a degree of basic HR admin that has to happen in the business, right? We've got to get our employment contracts right. We've got to get payroll right if we're doing payroll. We've got to get the data in the HRIS right. We've got to get our letters that we send out, all these. So there's a bunch of stuff that we do that is admin, and you've really got to nail that stuff, right? If you ignore that, or if you don't do it well, then nobody will expect that you can do the strategic stuff well. So you've got to get both of those things. And I think eventually, if you get those right, well, I think I'd say there's one other thing that I think has helped me, which is have some kind of a value proposition that is important to you. So to me, it's the mental health aspect, right? So when I started in this role, I was very vocal about this idea of the vision that I wanted to build. I believe that you can build a workplace that is focused on the human behind the work and does the right thing for the human behind the work, and also delivers shareholder value. I believe that's possible. Right? That's how I went into this role. So that was my, and remains still today, part of my this kind of value proposition that I have. It's like a flag that I plant. So when people look at me, they don't just see the HR guy, they see the HR guy who really cares about mental health. And then I think that gives you at least one path in, because at some point that executive is going to deal with a person who is struggling with mental health for which they are not equipped. And then they will invite me in. And once they invite me in, and they'll only invite me in because I've got all the other basics right, they trust that I'm going to not screw it up, right? They'll invite me in and I'll go and I'll do that intervention well. And now I'm creating a relationship with this person where they know that they can come to me to ask me for stuff and they will get something of value. And so I think so you need these three things: the leadership, sort of making sure that everybody else is asking for you to come in, getting the basics right, and then having something of value that other executives want from you. And once you get that, you are invited in. And I can't tell you how different it is to work in a scenario where an executive wants you to be there versus where you're there because you have to be, or you're on the outskirts looking in, trying to like get a bit of information for you to do your job. Once you're invited in, it changes the whole landscape. It makes things a lot easier. You also then start to work in those gray areas that we spoke about, those really interesting, difficult places where there's push and pull between what an executive might need in terms of growth for profits versus what a person might need in terms of their ability to go pick their kids up at 4:00 every afternoon. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's where the real work gets done, and you need to be invited in to do that. And that's the most difficult thing of my role. How do you get invited in?
Well, it sounds like you've cracked it from what you've been saying, John. Getting yourself invited in.
Bits and pieces here and there. I think it's an ongoing struggle, right? But hopefully we do well enough. I hope I do. Maybe you can get some feedback from my peers. You'll find out.
Was it something that you found difficult when you first started the role, being able to make sure you're getting invited in, or actually is it something that you've been working on continuously and hasn't felt too hard?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I was lucky enough that when I started my role, I was sort of literally entry-level executive, right? But most of the other people in the executive team were also entry-level executives, and we were being trained by a CEO who was very experienced and very good at what he did. So fortunately, we were all kind of in the same boat. But at the same time, yes, I did find it difficult, right? Because I was trying to find my feet as an HR person. I didn't even know barely what the job was, right? So why would somebody else see the value in what I did? So yeah, I found it tough. I think my tech background helped me a little bit. But ultimately, yeah, I had to crack those three things to really get to the point where I was not just being invited in, but being invited in the context of adding something of actual value to what the business needed, something critical. Yeah, and I think today, I certainly don't take it for granted. I think there are a lot of places that I do get invited in, some places where I don't. So I certainly don't take it for granted. And if I'm ever focused in on some kind of work that enables my other work, it's always that. What am I doing today to make sure that tomorrow somebody's going to want me to work with them? And that doesn't have to be about being liked, right? That's about finding these things of value. What can I do today that is valuable to someone? And it also means sometimes some people will scratch their heads going, why is John doing that thing? Like, why is he even involved in that place with that person? Like, he shouldn't be doing that. And oftentimes the answer is because I'm creating some capital for myself to spend later. I'm trying to build that relationship. I'm trying to create that environment where somebody's going to see some value and then bring me in later.
Oh, could you give us an example of when you've done that?
No, because then the people that I've done it with will notice that I was sneaky and doing it at the time.
I'd say strategic, John.
It's about interventions, right? I think almost certainly, I know there's going to be a bunch of people that are going to shout at me when I say this. Almost certainly, I think one of the highest value things that a good HR team brings are the in-person interventions. Right? So we're going to set up processes and policies that help us scale. Of course, we're going to do that, right? You can't scale without these policies. But the thing that makes us as a business, the thing that really impacts people's lives, and the thing that allows us to really bring to bear the values that we all believe in are these human interventions that are enabled by HR. Because a lot of executives will stand back and go, Matt, can we do this? Like, there's this person asking for this thing. Can we allow them to do that? I don't know. And if you've got a great HR business partnering team, which we do, they can enter into that process and say, yeah, you can absolutely do this. Like, and let's do this for this person. And let's essentially change their view of work by making this one relatively small change for them. Maybe it's a 4-day week. Maybe it's additional holiday for a person that passed away who doesn't quite meet the criteria in your policy of bereavement leave. But come on, like, they live together, they whatever, this person raised them. So these human interactions, these human interventions, right? I think it's those interventions that can really set a business apart. They are highly, highly important to get right. And for me, I love to be able to do those things, because me doing some of those interventions really helps me, first of all, understand the business and understand people more, but also, show people that we're willing to go above and beyond to provide some value to them.
Gosh, you've shared so much wonderful advice already, John. I'm wondering if there's even more you can add when I ask you this next question, which is, what is the one piece of advice you would give to anyone who is about to start their first CPO role and is nervous about it?
I think it's a bit about what I spoke about already, right? And this might be a bit fluffy, but like, find that one value proposition that you have. What is your red line? A line that you will never cross. Something that you really want to change in the world. Like I said, for me, it was this idea of mental health. But what's yours? What is this thing that is hyper important to you? Maybe it's fairness. Maybe it's diversity. Maybe it's training, making people better. Like, find that thing, right? Find something that you can plant a flag in, that you can almost that will color your persona when people look at you. When people look at you, they see that value, and they realize and they know that that value is a non-negotiable for you. And if they need something in the context of that value, they come to you and they're going to get an expert. So find that value, read every book you can find about it, speak to every expert you can find about it, speak to anybody that will listen, test your theories, test your opinions on anybody that will listen, preferably people that are much, much cleverer than you, and then listen to them when they respond, and really hone that thing. So become expert on that thing, and then go out into the job and find a way to drive impact because of that thing. Everything else will follow, but you just need that one leading thing. I think it really helps, and it also makes your work fun. It gives your work purpose.
Oh, it's really inspiring to hear you say that, John. I can just picture people feeling fired up whilst they're listening to this, or watching it if I've been brave and actually put it on YouTube.
Yeah,
We'll see. And that brings us to the very final question for today.
Oh, wow, already.
Which is, are there any courses or qualifications you've taken that were particularly useful for succeeding as a Chief People Officer?
I'm going to have an unpopular opinion. I'm going to say no. The most important thing that I have done to get me to where I am is to be myself, be vulnerable, and find that sort of find that style of leadership that I want. And that doesn't come from courses and books and things. Now, I've done some interesting things, right? So I recently done a course at the Judge Business School, their CHRO program. Really good, like a fantastic course. It kind of helps. Very little practical advice of things that I'm going to implement, but there's so much advice on how to stop thinking in the weeds operationally, and like really get your mind into this kind of academic context where you're really thinking at a broad level about things. Now, that's important, right? I've done some stuff with the CIPD, important, but I don't think those are the things that are going to get you the job that you love. I think the thing that gets you the job that you love is knowing yourself, like really know yourself, know how you react to things, know what you want, find that value proposition for yourself, and then go out and find that. That to me is where success is.
Well, I think that's probably going to be a massive relief to lots of people who are thinking, oh gosh, have I got to do another course or more studying? But also a challenge as well, isn't it? To actually go and develop that self-awareness and develop that knowledge and develop that confidence as well.
Well, I would say, I've spoken about this a lot, luck, right? So again, hands down, I got to where I am today because of luck, because of the privilege that I have as a white male, because of a lot of things. But I think I heard a really great quote the other day. Luck is just preparedness waiting for an opportunity, right? If I think about my experience, I was highly vocal about things that I was passionate about, people, culture, doing the right things. I was vocal about that, and I was heard. And Brian saw something in me, as I said, that I hadn't even seen. So I think the idea is go out there, develop your opinions, and get them heard, right? Be vocal, be fearless, and see what happens.
Well, that's a brilliant note to end on. All I have to say is thank you so much, John. It's been absolutely fantastic chatting to you today and having you on the show.
Thank you. It's been really good to sort of delve into my past and relive some of these moments.
Wasn't John amazing? I really hope you enjoyed listening to the interview with him and that you were able to take a lot from it. And I always love hearing from you. So if there were any parts that you found particularly helpful or interesting, please do let me know. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can drop me a comment in the comments section below, or otherwise, please do feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or just drop me an email. And my email address is faye@brightskycareercoaching.co.uk. One thing to mention is that if you do look me up on LinkedIn or send me an email, you spell my name F-A-Y. I haven't got an E on the end, unlike other Fays. Another thing I wanted to let you know is that I went ahead and bought the book that John recommended, Work Rules by Laszlo Bock, and I totally agree with him. It's a great read. I'm busy working my way through it at the moment. I am going to add it to the list of all of the book recommendations we've had on HR Coffee Time so far. I think we must be up to about 100 recommendations. I really must check. If you want to see the full list, I'll put a link to it in the show notes, or you can find it in the blog section of my website, which is Bright Sky Career Coaching. Other things that I'll put in the show notes include a link to the Harvard Business Review article that John mentioned, and also the course that he told us that he had done. So they are in there for you as well. Then before I say goodbye, there are just a few ways I thought I would mention that you could support the show if you were feeling generous. The very first one is, if you think you have a friend or a colleague who would enjoy this episode or find it helpful, please do share it with them, or maybe even pop a post on social media recommending it. The second thing that you can do is, if you're watching this on YouTube, is to hit the subscribe button, and that means that you'll be notified whenever new episodes are released and whenever I put any other videos up on YouTube. Then the final way you can support the show is by rating it and reviewing it if you are listening to the audio only version. So you can normally rate it on all the podcast apps, so whichever podcast app you're listening to it in, or if you are listening in Apple Podcasts, then you can also write a review. Thank you so much if you are able to support the show in one of those ways. I hugely appreciate it. That's it from me for today, and I'm really looking forward to being back again soon with the next episode for you, which will be ready in exactly 2 weeks after you've watched or listened to this one. So take care and see you again soon. Bye.